Obviously, the timing of these new indictments is interesting for us, for the media, but also especially for Donald Trump, because he's got a high-profile summit coming up very soon with Vladimir Putin. I think it's actually in Helsinki on Monday. He's going to be having the summit. It's already previously been planned, but it is still expected to go forward. Now, it might seem like perhaps this information was being released and these indictments were being timed to affect that. Rod Rosenstein said that's not the case. He says the timing of the indictment's release is a function of the collection of the facts, the evidence, and the law, and a determination that it was sufficient to present the indictment at this time, which I guess could be true, but it certainly is in the air as this summit is coming up.
I think we have to actually, I don't think it's terribly important, but you have to take that, I would say, at face value, because they've had any number of opportunities to drop balls at more damaging times, particularly before the election. And so I just imagine that they just proceed rather to the oblivious extent that they,
possible.
Although now they did also suggest that there'll be no report coming until after the midterms.
No, these conspiracy theories, look, I get it. You say, hey, look, the timing sounds suspicious. How's this? If you really wanted to embarrass Donald Trump, you wouldn't tell him any of this. Remember, he got this information a couple of days before the public did, right? And you would let him go and fawn over Putin, which is what he's almost certainly going to do and would have done without this information. We had a wonderful relationship. We had a tremendous talk. He was a wonderful guy, etc. Then you would drop this and he'd look like a total jackass. If you wanted to embarrass Trump and you wanted to do the timing right, you wouldn't do it now and then have him
Friday afternoon, right? Friday morning.
Friday is when you release news you don't want people to cover, right? And then it allows Trump to then come out of the meeting with Putin and go, I was very tough on him. I asked him about it, and he says he didn't do it. Right now, whatever. He's going to say something absurd. But if he had like 2 brain cells to rub together, it would be a softball, it would be a layup. I mean, yeah, oh great, I went and yelled at Putin. You wouldn't believe how tough I was on him. You couldn't ask for better timing if you were Trump with this information.
So are you predicting that he is going to say, I was really tough on Putin?
Yeah, I'm predicting that he'll say that, but he can't help himself, so he will follow up by saying, but we had a tremendous meeting, and I think what's being done to Russia is very unfair.
I think we'll get that second part. I'm not sure that
he respects
me.
I think I was tough on him, and he respects me. He heard, like he said, he didn't do it, but he's going to look into it.
Yeah, something along those lines.
And as for your theory, I tend to agree with it. It makes a lot of sense to me, but with the caveat that Trump is immune to embarrassment and shame. He embarrasses himself 8 times a week, and it doesn't matter. So what's one more embarrassment or less at the end of the day? I'm serious.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, and like when she starts crying hysterically, mostly it's because she's done something wrong and she got caught, and so I'm encouraged by that because she feels a degree of, I shouldn't have done that. So I actually don't, like I usually laugh at her, right? I want it to go on and on and on. But Trump doesn't have that. That little thing doesn't exist, and you see it sometimes in other kids. And I always think, psychopath coming. Right?
Well, look, so regardless of what the timing was, I mean, it is coming up right before the summit, and so some politicians technically on both sides of the aisle have called on him to postpone the meeting until Russia makes some sort of assurance that they're going to do something about what they have already done.
And we'll
Chuck
do
Schumer,
again.
What's that?
And we'll almost certainly do again, as Cenk was getting at, because I imagine, I don't see North Carolina and Wisconsin and Indiana and all these states. Well, we got to tighten up. We got trouble coming.
I think Rhode Island's got it. So Chuck Schumer said President Trump should cancel his meeting with Vladimir Putin until Russia takes demonstrable and transparent steps to prove that they won't interfere in future elections. Glad-handing with Vladimir Putin on the heels of these indictments would be an insult to our democracy. Just the most recent one, I suppose. And there was a tweet with a statement from John McCain saying, if President Trump is not prepared to hold Putin accountable, the summit in Helsinki should not move forward. Asked about this, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, it's on. That was literally what she said.
What does that mean?
They're doing the meeting.
I see, okay.
So us reasonable progressives are stuck in the middle here. I don't know that I want him to cancel the summit or spit in Putin's face or launch missiles or do whatever, right?
Well, I don't want to launch missiles. I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, but you don't want him to do the summit.
I don't care.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at. So to us, look, I want him to meet with Kim Jong-un. I want peace in North Korea, etc. But I don't want him to be a sucker and then have him say, oh, he's a great guy and he's gotten rid of all of his nukes. Well, he hasn't. That didn't help, right? And so if he goes to Putin and is actually negotiating on our behalf for things that are important in the world and to avoid further conflict, wonderful. But do anybody really think that that's what Donald Trump is gonna do? He's gonna go there and embarrass himself, embarrass us. He's gonna kiss Putin's ass and he's gonna give him whatever he wants. He went to NATO and said, well, they speak Russian in Crimea anyway. Why don't they just, are you crazy? And he is, he just gives Russia everything they want. So he's gonna go to Putin and look, you know what I think. I think he's in his back pocket, but even if you don't think that, I'll tell you ahead of time like I always do. I guarantee you that he's gonna get nothing for us, and whatever Putin wants, he's gonna give it to him. So he might come out and declare that Crimea should be Russia. I don't know, but I know that we're not gonna get anything out of it. So there's no point to it. So I don't want further conflict. And yes, there are some people out there who think, oh good, let's use this to drum up more conflict in the world. We're not in that class, but we're also not in the gullible class who thinks that Trump's gonna go to talk to Putin and get something good for America. That's just not gonna happen.
Putin's objective, look, no one wants war. No one, and there isn't going to be war, and that's not an issue, right? So that's a massive red herring. Trump got what he wanted. There is massive discord inside NATO. There's weakness and indecision and uncertainty on NATO's part about what they can count on from the United States of America. That emboldens aggressive autocrats like Vladimir Putin. That's a win. He has it.
And by the way, that makes war more likely.
That's right. Overall,
because if Trump goes and kisses his ass one more time, what's going to stop Putin from taking Estonia? And if he does that and says, "Hey, Trump said they speak Russian in Crimea. They speak Russian in Estonia. A lot of people in Estonia speak Russian. So I use the Trump logic to take Estonia." Then war becomes more likely, not less likely.
So here's, one of the things, I'll preface my comment by saying one of the things that's bothered me about a lot of the reaction to the Russia stories is that a lot of Democrats and a lot of pretty liberal people sound like they're trashing diplomacy. And I believe in diplomacy, and I believe we got to keep talking to the Russians. They're the other nuclear superpower. I'm a backer of diplomacy. We can't let that stop. But on this one, I got to say, I take a fairly tough position. That part of diplomacy is you got to know when to say, no, the meeting's off. Because with this new information that's unacceptable, we'll get back to you at a later date, but it is not appropriate for two chiefs of state to meet while this is unresolved. So I would actually, for all of my talk for diplomacy, my first reaction, maybe I'll think about it more over the weekend, but my first reaction is to say, no, Trump ought to call it off.
Yeah.
That's diplomacy too, right? Acting tough, we're not canceling meetings.
So RJ, I'm glad you said that, because the diplomacy that we're talking, we're not on the verge of war. When we're on the verge of war, you talk and you keep talking and nobody walks out of the room, right? Because when people walk out of the room, then you're on the cusp of missiles being launched. This isn't that. This is a long issue with diplomacy. Of course, we're all in favor of diplomacy, but diplomacy isn't only, oh, I'm going to meet with this guy and have a giant summit, a publicity stunt. Of course, I'm glad he talked to Kim theoretically. But the low-level discussions are what's important anyway. And we weren't on the verge of war with North Korea. We're not now, we weren't before. So this is all nonsense. Diplomacy is a long game that we've been playing successfully in the parts regarding NATO and the Soviets since 1945, effectively for 73 years.
Okay, and Trump says, in following up to his message that the Russians should basically have Crimea, he said, well, if it was Obama's fault anyway. If I was president, he wouldn't have been able to do that. Well, hey, Donald Trump, good news for you. You're president now, and you have a chance to be so tough on Russia that they don't do anything like an aggressive action like that against the West again. Because that's your point about Obama. Oh, he let him take Crimea, right? Well, we just found out for sure that the Russians tried to interfere in our elections, not with tweets, but actually get into the ballot box. They tried to steal our elections. So are you going to let him get away with it? My guess is yes. In fact, in the first statement that he did, that the White House put out was, see, this shows that Trump was never involved. Number one, of course, as usual, not true. It doesn't show that at all. They didn't speak to that. They said this is not about that. That's a different matter. This is about, did the Russians actually hack into the DNC, Hillary Clinton's emails and steal those emails? Yes, it was Russian intelligence officials that did that. And more importantly, in all of our minds, they try to get into the ballot boxes, okay? Now, that's a thing you should be pissed about if you're the American president. You should be outraged by that. And there should be consequences, not military consequences, but something. So, because if there's no consequences, no sanctions, no anything, why don't you just open up a sign that says, China, anyone else, break into our ballot boxes anytime you like, we'll reward you afterwards. So, like Richard pointed out, part of diplomacy is also being tough. Tough doesn't mean war. If you're a neocon, that's all it ever means, right? But we're not neocons. We have the whole range of actions here. And if Trump goes there and he's done nothing so far, he's not showed 1% interest in actually protecting America. And he's president now. So is he gonna protect America, or is he only concerned about himself? And you know what the answer to that is. That's why every single comment so far has been me, 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 me. It's a witch hunt. Oh, they're coming to get me, but I'm innocent. How about us? You're supposed to be the president of the United States. You're supposed to represent us. And he does no such thing. So I don't want that embarrassment meeting with anyone.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.